This is TWiT.
This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. Join an engaging IT learning community with ACI Learning and IT Pro. Hey, congratulations to Don Pizzette, IT Pro's co-founder and original edutainer, and the entire TechNado team for their 300th podcast. Good going, guys. Get your standard or premium IT Pro membership by using the code TWIT30 at checkout for 30% off. Check out go.acilearning.com/twit to learn more.
One of the more worrisome revelations of the past week came to light last Thursday when Google's Project Zero's standard non-disclosure deadline expired 90 days after they had informed their Android hardware and software partner, Samsung, of the 18 separate vulnerabilities they had discovered lurking inside Samsung's widely used, even by Google's Pixel phones, Exynos modems. And here's the big news. 4 of those vulnerabilities are as bad as any can get for an always connected smartphone. And in fact, those 4 vulnerabilities are so bad that Google has decided to make a rare exception to their standard disclosure policy, which is like fix it by 90 days or else. Well, not else in this case. For the sake of the world, they are continuing to hold back details because it is that bad. Okay,
now, is this different than the SS7 broadband baseband exploit? This is a new one.
Oh, yeah. This is not an exploit against the SS7 protocol. These are, as they call them, internet to baseband remote code execution vulnerabilities, which requires
zero click.
No
Nothing.
click.
I just need to know your phone number. That's it.
That's exactly right.
Horrible.
So, okay, they said in late 2022 and early 2023, Project Zero reported 18 zero-day vulnerabilities in Exynos modems produced by Samsung Semiconductor. The 4 most severe of these 18 vulnerabilities allow for internet to baseband remote code execution. Tests conducted by Project Zero confirm that those 4 vulnerabilities allow an attacker to remotely compromise a phone at the baseband level, that is, underneath the operating system, down at the chip, at the cellular modem chip level, with no user interaction, and require only that the attacker know the victim's phone number. With limited additional research and development, we believe, said Google, that skilled attackers would be able to quickly create an operational exploit to compromise affected devices silently and remotely. In other words, you now know what all of the state-level actors and, for example, what the NSO group in Israel are busy doing is like, what? Like, come on, go figure it out. So they said the 14 other related vulnerabilities were not as severe, as they require either a malicious mobile network operator, in other words, it's got to be carried by the cellular protocol, or an attacker with local access to the device. Okay, as for where these chips are in use, and thus what devices would be vulnerable attack targets, first of all, none of our listeners, unless you're the king of Siam or something, probably need to worry, right? This would only be a targeted attack. Script kiddies are unlikely to ever get access to this. But, if you might be a target, then pay attention to these model numbers. So Google said Samsung Semiconductor's advisories provide the list of Exynos chipsets that are affected by these vulnerabilities. Based on information from public websites that map chipsets to devices, affected products likely include mobile devices from Samsung, including those in the S22, M33, M13, M12, A71, A53, A33, A21S, A13, A12, and A04 series. Mobile devices from Vivo, including those in the S16, S15, S6, X70, X60, and X30 series. The Pixel 6 and Pixel 7 series of devices from Google, and any devices that use the Exynos Auto, as in automobile, T5123 chipset. Now, Leo, I'm not hip enough to like these model numbers. Are these current smartphones? These series? Do you know like how recent these things are? Not clear to me. They said we expect
Hold on,
that patch.
I was over here. I was painting the ceiling. Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm back. Yes, I think it is. The S23 is the current Samsung phone, and I believe that has that Exynos chip in it. And Google, in its Pixel phones, this is the Pixel 7.
Okay, so 6 and 7, they both do. Google knows that.
They have Samsung chips, so they never said Exynos. In fact, they didn't want to say Samsung, but then we found out. So now we know. Yeah.
Okay. So they said sorry to make you run.
A lot of modern smartphones have Qualcomm, but these don't, and the Samsungs don't. So there you go.
Of course, Samsung is not going to use Qualcomm.
Yeah, no, they're going to use Exynos. Yeah,
right. So they said Google said we expect that patch timelines will vary per manufacturer. They said, for example, affected Pixel devices received fixes for all 4 of the severe internet to baseband remote code execution vulnerabilities in the March 2023 security
which
update.
Came out about a minute ago. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
Right, and but this also says, one of the things that we've said is if you care about your Android smartphone security, then you really want to be with someone who is going to be patching responsibly. And that's going to be Google and Samsung.
Yep, there it is, the March update. This is it.
Yep.
And they
said, in the meantime, users with affected devices can protect themselves from the baseband remote code execution vulnerabilities mentioned in this post by turning off Wi-Fi calling and voice over LTE data in their device settings. So there is a workaround. Again, so it's if you only leave old school cellular connectivity on, then you're safe. It is the internet and the data connectivity that is where the vulnerability comes from. And they said, as always, we encourage end users to update their devices as soon as possible to ensure that they're running the latest builds that fix both disclosed and undisclosed security vulnerabilities.
See, I get it now because I'm looking at the devices, and they're all in the last couple of years. And that's because VoLTE and Wi-Fi calling is in the last couple of years. So there's clearly in that part of it. Because, for instance, the S23, the newest Samsung, is not on the list, which means they figured it out and fixed it. But all of the stuff from the last couple of years, including the Pixel 6 and 7 are. So
or maybe the 23 is not, because they're using, they certainly Samsung didn't know of the problem and fix it in the 23.
They must be using a different chipset somehow.
Yes, or they just re-engineered it and the re-engineering didn't have the problem.
They fixed it by accident. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So okay, so here's how Google has positioned their unusual decision not to fully disclose after 90 days, which is a violation of, it's been a hard and fast rule for them. So they said, under our standard disclosure policy, Project Zero discloses security vulnerabilities to the public a set time after reporting them to a software or hardware vendor. In some rare cases where we have assessed attackers would benefit significantly more than defenders if a vulnerability was disclosed, we have made an exception to our policy and delayed disclosure of that vulnerability due to a very rare combination of level of access these vulnerabilities provide and the speed with which we believe a reliable operational exploit could be crafted, we've decided to make a policy exception to delay disclosure for the 4 vulnerabilities that allow for internet to baseband remote code execution. We'll continue our history of transparency by publicly sharing disclosure policy exceptions, and we'll add these issues to that list once they're all disclosed. In other words, they're saying, we're not going to tell you what's wrong, but we're at least going to tell you that we're not going to tell you. So, there's something wrong even if you don't yet know what. So they said of the remaining 14 vulnerabilities, we're disclosing 4 vulnerabilities that have exceeded Project Zero's standard 90-day deadline today. They said these issues have been publicly disclosed in our issue tracker, as they do not meet the high standard to be withheld from disclosure, as the 4 bad ones do. They said the remaining 10 vulnerabilities of those 14 in this set have not yet hit their 90-day deadline. Remember, there were some that were disclosed only in 2023, so earlier this year, but will be publicly disclosed at that point if they remain unfixed. So, the concern here is that these 4, this is a big, juicy set of infinitely, essentially, powerful exploits, which every very powerful and really bad actor in the world knows now not only exists, but also roughly where it exists. And as always, we know that there's a huge difference between a patch being available and that patch being applied everywhere it's needed. Google's Pixel devices, as we noted, were early recipients of those patches, and presumably Samsung's devices will be too. But what about those Vivo phones and the automobiles that incorporate those chips?
Those will never be updated, of course. Nobody updates that. Yeah, right.
Exactly. So, as I said, random people, like most of us, almost certainly have little to fear, since script kiddies are never going to get their hands on these. But this is the sort of vulnerability which is exactly what the likes of Israel's NSO group is looking to add to their Pegasus smartphone spyware, as are other less public state-level actors. So I would imagine that without exception, the victims of the exploitation of these vulnerabilities would only be those who are highly targeted and valuable. Mm-hmm. And of course, it will turn their phone into listening devices, right? I mean, they'll suck out their messaging history and what they're doing and tracking, and also probably turn the microphone on in order to eavesdrop in real time. So anyway, it's no comfort if you might be such a target, but hopefully you've got, you're not using some random also ran Android device that might have this chip. You've got, a Pixel or a Samsung, and it'll get fixed quickly. And as Google noted, there is a way that you could, until your device is patched, you could make yourself secure if you were someone who should be concerned about that. So, of course, always good to keep our devices patched, but I doubt that most of us have anything to worry about. And, I don't, since I'm an iOS device user. So